Hey everybody, welcome back to the Spinner Rack. Today I'm here with my boys and our special guest star, Professor CA. Say what's up, Professor CA.
What's up, Professor CA?
Cal, Petey, how you guys doing? Give us a shout out here.
What up?
Yeah, ready to rock.
Today we're talking about the news, the one that's just been dropping. Okay, Marvel is basically dropping Diamond Comics. Yeah, they're gonna still be selling stuff through them, but they're going through a whole nother distribution. What the goony goo goo is going on? I don't know what. Now, are we going to get comic books on Mondays and Sundays instead of on Tuesdays and Wednesdays? What's going on? I'm going to have my boy PD over here give us a brief explanation of what he thinks this means.
Well, I think this is taking the major money out of Diamond, and they probably have to very much restructure their whole business since they won't be the lead company that's dealing with Marvel. And that's what their people were, the comic stores were kind of hoping that that Marvel and the independents would just go through Diamond, because DC had already left, and the comic stores were kind of like, oh, we're not going to hold DC. Of course, those same stores probably have DC in them now, but Marvel doing it is making it a little harder, and they're definitely gonna have to restructure their whole business to try to stay alive during this period. And same thing for the stores trying to figure this sort of thing out, and whatever new rates they have to go through to get the Marvel comics. They talk about the actual, you can order through Diamond, but I think a comic professional, Stephen Grant, he was like saying this is like, almost the end of the world. But then of course in comics, the next thing they're talking about is Starro. So that was his comment on the thing where people forgot about this. But it's a clear and present danger type of thing, something to worry about. But for Diamond and the independents, not really for Marvel and DC, to see how the independents get through this, because the independents kind of almost sometimes they do promotional things, like a lot of stuff like IDW. People don't talk about Image and what their finances, but they talk about all the other companies and how they're struggling. So, it's a tough time at this time, and it's hard to see what's going to happen after, but I'm pretty sure they have to restructure their whole business without having Marvel as one of their key comics too. And then the other problem is with Marvel, they don't get the books out on time. We just saw the 616 thing with Mars's boy, Dan Slott, and since they don't get the books out on time, like, what does it matter if they put the books out on Sunday? Like, which books are they going to be? That we're distributing the new Dan Slott book on Sunday, or not this Sunday, maybe next Sunday. Like, so.
Okay. So, hey, what about you, Cal? What's your take on this madness?
Oh man, I'm sorry he said Dan Slott. I was about to go off on a tangent, but I'm going to stay focused. I'm going to stay focused on what we got right over here.
Thank you very much.
No, with the background, years ago, you got to be deep into the whole stuff with comics. There were different distributors. But that became problematic because not everybody came through. So if you worked with the wrong distributor, everybody else was getting their books, and you were asking this guy, hey, when is stuff going to come in? So slowly but surely, Diamond became the distributor. Everybody went there, and you can't fault them. Diamond did what they were supposed to do. They got the orders and they got the books out. With the problem came with the pandemic, where Diamond tried to have this fairness, unilateral fairness at the end of the day. So people like Marvel and DC could have gotten their stuff out without any issue, but a lot of the smaller publishers weren't going to be able to do that. And then Diamond was also, well, we could get books to certain people, but we wouldn't be able to get them to all comic stores because some places are, closed by government edict and others aren't. So because of that, that left, DC was the first one to make the move and say, well, look, we want to get our books out. So they decided that they would go with a different publisher. And they also, were in discussion with Diamond about, I don't know about coming back, but one of the sticklers was that DC wanted to have their books out on Tuesday, which would be a day before everybody else was going to come, books were going to come out. Diamond was like, no, we're not doing that. So they went their own way, and they got, everybody was like, oh, they're just doing this. They're trying to kill Diamond, so on and so forth. But that was the option they could take. It's a totally different landscape now as opposed to what it was before. And so they made that move. Usually if DC makes a move and it's successful for them, don't be surprised when Marvel comes and makes a similar, if not the same move altogether. So they're making this move right now with Penguin. and they'll probably end up being pretty successful with it. I don't know what that means. If they're going to say, well, we want our books to come out Monday instead of Tuesday, or Sunday instead of what have you, or how much they're going to spread these books out. Because if they're with Penguin, then they could really make a good push as to places they could put their books in. They could definitely have a lot more, they definitely have a lot more room to experiment, but they would not have to worry about distribution. They, if Penguin can't get it out there, then yeah, you've got a real problem. The larger story is what happens to the smaller publishers and comic stores if Diamond is no longer the big guy that is putting out all the books.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Hey, Professor C, what's your take on this?
It seems as if prior to COVID, Diamond had like distribution on lock. So because of the pandemic and they're kind of them trying to still hold on to a monopoly, so to speak, yeah, now it seems like it's all a toss in the air. Now it seems like there's some openings available for competitors. So I'm trying to get a sense of who are the new competitors if it's not Diamond. Like who are these other or what are these other platforms? And then is this kind of just like a slow tumble to a shift to digital? And does that bring up the digital versus print stuff again?
So I mean, I think that one of the right now Marvel's going with Penguin Random House, a book publisher basically to publish their comics, not to publish, to distribute their comics and stuff. And while DC went with some company named Lunar Distribution. At one point, I think it was Lunar and Midtown Comics at the same time, but now it's Lunar Distribution has most of the stuff there, which is pretty interesting. But there's some pluses and minuses here, and naturally we have to look at it with the COVID situation. Though I think DC was already canceling its distribution deal with Diamond just before COVID, because I think I think it happened like the year before. I think December or November, something around that time. So they were already prepping to move somewhere else. And that's because, Diamond had a lock and Diamond could do basically what it wanted to do, And while that was good for Diamond, it wasn't necessarily always good for the industry. It wasn't always good for the smaller retailers and stuff. I think generally they were a big positive, but I mean, I know some retailers complained about, how slow they were to react to certain things, how slow they were to get product to them. But overall, I think most people, especially independent comics, where they need a distributor to get them, and Diamond had that whole gigantic reach, it was better for them. But COVID showed up that there was a lot of issues that they could do, like Cal was just basically saying. And, Marvel's trying to get more bang for the buck, and so is DC, and more control over their distribution. They don't really care about smaller retailers. What they care is getting their products sold and their products making money. So, I mean, it makes sense from that point of view, but my biggest fear is twofold. One, if their focus now is going to be, getting their comics out to the most people or the most comics. I mean, Penguin Random House is a book publisher. They're going to try to get their stuff published in bookstores and other venues. Yeah, they're going to do the comic, but that's never been their focus over the years. Their focus has always been the bookstores and other venues like airports or whatever. So now they're jumping in the middle of this, right? Trying to take up this market. Are they going to be as cognizant of what's necessary to keep this market afloat? And these smaller comic book stores, comic book companies such as IDW, Image, Dark Horse, Boom, is this good for them? Because I mean, basically now without the DC and Marvel being the biggest drivers of success in the distribution, what's going to happen to the revenue for Diamond? Most likely Diamond is going to have to cut. And when they cut, what are they going to cut? And is the cuts going to hurt these smaller comics? And let's not even talk about the retailers. Will they still have some of the same options that they have to return? Oh, they don't really return stuff anymore, but will they still have some of the flexibility they've had in the past? Probably not. They may just have to pay for everything up front and call it a day. So I mean, I think it was great when everybody had one thing where everybody knew Comic Day was Wednesday, but now, Marvel can come around and say, hey, we're going to do our Comic Day on Monday. There's nothing to hold them back to do that, because if DC seems to have been doing pretty well on Tuesday, probably they'll move it to Tuesday from now on. But overall, I think the comic stores are going to be the biggest losers. I just don't see how they get around this. Them and the smaller comics, I just don't see it. And lastly, of course, Diamond. Diamond is, no matter what it says, I think that their president said everything's going to be well. They're taking a huge hit. You know, they got the two biggest companies that drive what 60-70% of all their comic book sales. Those things are now being handled by somebody else. You know, I mean,
Does Jeff Bezos listen to this podcast? I hope not.
Why
hey,
worried about that now?
I've been telling these two guys for years about the numbers. I've been quoting things from a company called Comicron about how, you know, other distribution channels have been being used, from online, people buying comics, and it's just accelerated over the course of the whole pandemic. You know, most people I know, a lot of people I know are buying comics, no longer going to the comic store, but ordering online, or they're just going straight digital, or they're going to Comixology. And those are traumatic changes. And basically what that means, they're not going to the comic retailers anymore. And so these guys are like, hey, why even, you know, if before we had 70% of the comics were going through the comic retailers, now we're having less than that, then why even, you know, we don't need to spend as much time focusing on it. We need to grow the other things. And so, I mean, that's why I fear for the retailers. You know, those are the guys you go into and you feel it's like the old Tower Records, the old record stores. You know, you go in there, you find an expert, somebody you can talk to about these books, these records, and you know what sounds good. Hey, should you get the CD? Should you get the the record itself? What sounds better? You know, what the latest thing? Oh, did you see who he was influenced by? Stuff like that. You're not going to get that. And you know, it just reminds me of when was that big the big explosion when the comics went down and the retail started closing? What year was that? 2000 what?
96.
96. You know, I feel that's going to happen. It's going to be a shake.
Marvel, don't try to get around it. Marvel broke the industry. Pulling
Again.
So it's like they did it once, and then they said, we're going to take our stuff, we're going to distribute it to our specialty stores that they never got to make, that would have toys and Marvel comics and back issues. They had no understanding of the business, but they decided they were going to do that. DC at the same time also took their books out of the newsstand. And we have what could have held off the crash made a little bit later, because the newsstand probably would have, you know, struggled because of the loss of the speculators. But that initially pulling all the books out of the newsstand really cut the industry, which they thought was losing money. And then they realized, oh, this part of the business is profitable for us.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough thing, bro. It's, you know, I think some of these things are short term. You know, I thought, you know, the whole fact that everybody got together, you know, they had the whole comic book day and, you know, previews. I have previews right here. You know, I got the latest preview right here. You know, where they have the War of the Bounty Hunters. Before, previews used to have, and this is something they used to make a lot of money from Diamond, where all the comic companies would place ads here. You know, they don't have to do that anymore, really. You know, DC stopped doing it. They do their own inserts, so they don't have to put it in previews. And the same thing's going to probably happen with Marvel. They already do their own supplements, so why even? And if they're going to have their own distributor, why even put it in there? Sorry?
Previews before the store owners mostly, and then at some point it had so much cool stuff in it, people wanted to buy it. Because I would see them and I'd be like, oh, sweat, I get to see that sort of preview thing. And then I'd start snatching those things up. In the 90s, they were really big. Early on, they used to be bare bones and they'd have a couple pictures. Then they had inserts, the image inserts, every other page was the image insert. So,
I mean, I find more toys and more indie stuff here than the Marvel stuff now. Because, you know, it used to be bigger. I think, I don't know how much more bigger, but you know, it's going to be different, man. It's going to be different. And the fracturing of the industry, we'll see what happens. Again, you know, probably the way to go, Pete and I have talked about it, the way to go is to go online, do Kickstarter, see if that can work for you. You know, it's not ideal. And I think some of them have already started doing it. I think it's all Berserk. That's what, Boom Studios, PD?
yep, they got Berserk. Jeff Johns got something going on. Gary Frank.
Those are the bigger names, though. Those guys can do that.
But as time goes on, I mean, that's probably going to be where people are going to go. And the physical comic is going to, you know, well, not necessarily. The physical comic is definitely going to take a hit, you know. I think I saw something where they're saying comic physical sales dropped during the pandemic, but online stuff I can't seem to find. But the online stuff soared. So I remember when the pandemic started, I couldn't find a comic store. So where would you go? And they weren't releasing anything. And then DC started releasing stuff.
This is I've heard the same I've heard the same doom and gloom story about comics, forever. In terms of them, I mean, this goes back to like the 1950s when you had Wortham with the seduction of the innocent. And to be honest, that was more of a threat towards comics than anything else that's come down the pipe in the decades since. You have the pandemic. Yes, I would expect the digital copies are going to be easier to get than a physical copy if the store is not open. So of course these guys will see some sales. And right now you still have a bit of flux when everything happens. But the idea of a comic book and you're going to go digital with the comic book, it defeats the purpose. You don't need the art thing. Okay, you don't need the colors. You could just, hey, just have a print, just have a prose story at the end of the day describing it, and you could listen to it for all of that. But why put the money in for it? There is an experience that you get with comic books that you don't get with the prose novel, or watching a cartoon, or playing a video game. And the digital experience is not it. And the other thing what they do is the digital experience of the I hear people complain they don't want to pay X amount of dollars for a comic book, but you're willing to pay like $2-3 for a digital copy that's really nothing more than just a send up or a print of that comic book. It doesn't have any of the features that digital should allow you. Okay, it doesn't move. There's no sound or anything of that nature. It's not engaging the other senses. So it's not something that's superior to what you would have in an actual comic book. As long as you have people who appreciate that art form, and as long as you have people who appreciate that medium in terms of reading, because not everybody can really get into a comic book. It's not as easy as a lot of people would think. It does take a little bit of practice, and it does take some appreciation for how that goes down. It is an art form at the end of the day. And as long as you have that appreciation for it, it doesn't go anywhere. And comics have proven to be very, very resilient in the face of, every 5 years somehow, well, this is going to be the death of comics. I guess it used to be every 15 years. Let everything shake up. Let's at least get back to the point where we have a country that's vaccinated enough where people can congregate once more, and then we can see where things go. This right now, in terms of Marvel, the biggest hit is to Diamond. It's not going to affect stores too much because they can still get books. It's not going to affect readers too much because they can still get books. Now, Diamond may have to look to push some stuff, but if the future is Kickstarter, then yeah, that's pretty much the end of comics. Because Kickstarter is not about comics. Kickstarter is about branding. Okay, Kickstarter is about putting up a comic, selling a mug and a cap and a T-shirt, more than it is about, hey, let's push a story or something of that nature. But that's a totally different story and a totally different show.
But I think no one's saying the death of comics. I think that the format, whether the physical comic, I think the key thing, the stories and the art are still going to be around, whether physical or not. I think it's just a question of, to what degree, where before comic book sales were always the ones that led stuff. And I've shared that with you guys before, and I could share it again. The article, you guys have looked at the article before, so it's not like this is something totally gone. In 2019, the estimated North American comic book was 1.2 billion to market, right? And according to this is the Comic-Con and ICV2, they were saying that the way it broke down was book channels going through bookstores was 570 million, and that's mostly graphic novels. And comic stores were doing 525 million. Are they going to do 525 million this year? I mean, 2020, I doubt it. The digital downloads were 90 million. Are they going to? I don't think that number is going to be 90 million. I think it's going to be more, if anything, across that. So I think that the fact of the matter is we have to be cognizant that this thing is going to be changing. Graphic novels, according to, again, this statistics, and I can shoot to you again. Well, graphic novels in 2019 did $765 million versus regular comics of 355 and digital at 90. So we're going to have some changes of what's going on. And graphic novels, of course, the numbers are not the same because those have a higher price point than the comic books. I just think that we need to be realistic that what tends to happen if you have a distributor like the Diamond and they have all these other companies all these other comic book companies that they normally go to and they distribute to all these different retailers. And now that some of their biggest customers are no longer using them primarily, they're going to have to cut back somehow. And if they cut back somehow, they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to do the same type of things that they were doing before. And it goes to say also, Penguin Random House, they're now firmly in Marvel. Whatever Marvel wants, Marvel gets. Their idea is not to have Boom or IDW compete at the same level as them. And the same thing with DC. DC has Lunar distribution. Their thing is DC. So I think that you're going to see some changes. And unfortunately, those comic book store retailers who are not up or realizing that there's going to be some changes, they're going to get hurt. You know, Diamond.
I'm gonna chime in that the Marvel already took their trade paperback out of the bag of Diamond a while ago, because that stuff goes through the company called Hatchet. So
Okay.
they already pulled that a while ago. So
Okay.
so it's like, I mean, Diamond's already dealing with that. They're not getting any deals on the Marvel trade paperback, which they seem to have adjusted in the last few years. I'm not sure when they gave them that sort of thing, but they had, the Marvel had a bigger push, and I don't know if it was from this other company, where they started looking through and pulling stuff that the Quesada sort of universe would never have published. I mean, the amount of stuff that they reprinted of like John Burns stuff, where they were like, none of this 2000 stuff. What do we got here? Put all this stuff out there. So they kind of gone a little bit beyond that. So, they're already dealing with it, that sort of thing. They're not making money off of Marvel from the trade paperbacks.
And if they're getting in bed with Penguin, they're not getting in bed with Penguin. They're not getting in bed with Penguin until they can push the digital copies. You don't need to do anything with them to do that.
No, I agree. But I'm saying they're taking control of their distribution network. And one of the things they're going to do is control how it's sent out and probably push down the price of what they have.
Well, that's good. I don't think they're going to push down the price, but they're going. I mean, they'll save money in terms of dealing with Diamond, I would think. But comic books are expensive. That is an expensive hobby at this point. It's not $1. It's not a quarter. I don't see it going back there at any particular time. It's a niche market. It was a niche market even when I was a kid. It was a niche market. There were more people reading it. So, I just don't see, I don't see bread going back to 10 cents. I don't see, milk, being delivered by a guy in an all white outfit. And I don't see comics going down in price at any time if you're going to buy them. Those are, I mean, anybody who's followed comics long enough to realize there has been a lot of change from the point where I started reading comics to now. There's been a lot of change. There's been a lot of stuff that was tried. Some stuff worked. A lot of stuff didn't. Okay, one of the things that I really miss were all the comic magazines we used to have, between Comic Reader, Wizard, Hero. There was all these different magazines that focused on, behind the scenes stuff in comics. Now you'd be hard pressed to find anything of that nature. But there used to be a really healthy appetite for comics and what was going on behind the scenes in terms of their making, previews, interviews with artists. And a lot of that stuff went by the wayside once you got YouTube. You could get stuff directly from the artist, himself. Buy anything. We're getting all this free. You were getting all of this free commentary from the show, and then that changed. That got locked down. Now these guys were like, "Hey, you're not giving free interviews. We're just working through DC. Got to get money. There's a monetary value in what I'm doing over here." So the comic books have withstood a lot of change at the end of the day. And that, something I think we definitely want to make clear, in spite of anything that's happening right here. And long story, at least for me, the long story short, the biggest hit is to Diamond. And to be honest, if what you're saying is true and they're pushing more toys and then they are comics, then they'll be just fine, because those guys aren't giving up their distribution.
Yeah. More toys and other materials. Yeah, that's the only way they're going to survive. Games, and we've seen that already in some of the comic book stores. And I know that's that from some of the other comic stores. And you go to Midtown, and their top half is basically models and toys and T-shirts and stuff like that. That's what they're selling on top. While downstairs is, their regular comics and the graphic novels are always on sale for like 20 or 40% off. So it's interesting, man. It's just interesting. But I'm just hoping everybody works through it. Everybody's able to work through this new system. Just have to be a little bit nimble. So, gentlemen, any more things before we got to talk about this, or are we closing this out?
We are shutting
right. So, if you like what you heard, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, spin a rack.
Out. Give us a job.
Bye-bye. So, I don't know what the next 7 minutes, but